Alrighty, tonight our Liberty Minute is entitled, Liberty Isn't Getting Everything You Want. You don't get everything you want just because you're free. That is the counter argument for liberty. So listen to where I'm going here. If you get everything you want, someone else has to not get something they want, and maybe that was something they worked for and earned. Isn't that true? And it kind of makes me think of our next video, which is going to talk about Occupy Wall Street. And I'm hearing a bunch of kids who haven't done anything yet except spend mommy and daddy's money to go to Harvard, who want a corner office and a six-figure income and a company car, and they haven't done anything. That doesn't sound like liberty to me. So if you want, for example, free medical care, and they take money from you and provide it to me, well, that's not liberty for either one of us. I'm being provided for, and you are being taken from. We provide for pets, right? And when we take something, we're harvesting. So I wonder, that term we've all heard from time to time, sheeple, is that the 53% of Americans who pay federal tax? We're being fleeced constantly, and they're taking our fleece and covering someone else with it and keeping them warm? I don't know. The government is literally harvesting us to provide for its pets. When it does that, there is no liberty there. There is no, quote, social justice, unquote, there. What a misnamed concept, the term social justice, when used in this particular way. I'm so disappointed in the rhetoric where we went as Americans. Many of the folks here have seen a few more decades, or a couple more decades than I have. And you saw the beginning of some of our social programs, which I think probably sounded like a really good idea at the beginning. You know, the war on poverty, everybody here remembers the war on poverty. But now, 40 years later, we've got 5 times as many people in poverty. It seems like our war on poverty was a complete and utter failure to me. And meanwhile, we took from others to do no good for someone else. To make sure that you have what you want, you take away from someone who earned what they have. It is a complete counter-argument against basic liberty. It just cannot work that way. Liberty is freedom, and by its very nature, some people, when given that freedom, will make poor choices. They will get results based on their choices, their execution, their planning, and a million other variables are going to factor into what is the result of their life or what their particular project is going to be. And that means that some people are going to get an F. Some people are going to get a big old 0. Some will get a C, and there's going to be a few folks who get a super A. That's how liberty works. And the more liberty you have for a longer period of time, the more people there will be who will be willing to go out and try to achieve that super A. So you end up with more prosperity as you use liberty for a longer time. The guy who's getting a 0 might not move up to a D. It's okay, that's what he gets. Maybe a D is all he can do, it's up to him. Now, does that mean that if someone is starving, we don't feed them? I say, of course not. But I get to decide which situation I deem worthy of my sacrifice. And this is a thing that just really gets me. How many times have we all heard that when we pay our taxes and those taxes are used for another citizen's benefit, that's compassion? That is not compassion. That is a lie. Because the last time I checked, if you are compelled to work for no pay, and I get to keep the output of your work, I think we had an amendment that dealt with that. Something about slavery? That sounds exactly like slavery to me. If you must work and I benefit, that is slavery. And, you know, I'm looking at the crowd here. Lots of folks here on Social Security. I don't think Social Security is entitlement, because every single daggone one of us have been paid into Social Security our whole doggone lives. And it really frustrates me that the very first thing the folks in Washington want to say we're going to cut is the thing we all paid for. And I get pretty frosty thinking that my dad is supposed to live on less money because they can't keep their checkbook in order. I'm sorry, I get very upset about this whole concept. This idea that it's compassion for us to pay taxes to feed other people is just such a lie, and here's the proof. If you don't pay your taxes, what happens? after a while you're gonna like get a little notice in the mail, right? Mr. So-and-so, you owe us some money. And if you ignore that notice, and then do something, a good idea might be to take your money out of the bank, because you know after they start sending notices, they're gonna go to your bank account and start taking it, right? That's the next step. So if you ignore the notices and pull your money out of the bank so they can't garnish it, who are they gonna send to your door? I think some guys with guns. So this really isn't feeling like compassion anymore. I'm thinking liberty is a concept that we've forgotten as Americans as we've gotten wrapped up in these misnomers like compassion. Alrighty, now we're gonna watch the Occupy Wall Street, and this video I think does a great job of explaining some of the core differences between the folks that are complaining on the Occupy Wall Street thing and us at the Tea Party. You know, us folks that we've had millions of people marching. We haven't had a single rape, a single sexual assault, not a single murder. Wow. Meanwhile, the Occupy Wall Street, I don't even know how many, but there's been a bunch. We are not them. Even if they're trying to co-opt what we're saying, we want smaller government, but their solution is bigger government. So, you gonna roll that one, Jim?
Well, hi everybody, I'm Bill Whittle, and this is Afterburner. Well, there are protesters in several major American cities using their iPads at Starbucks to make Facebook and Twitter updates on the evils of corporations, and you don't know whether to laugh or cry, honestly. What we're seeing here, I think, are the self-esteem movement's chickens coming home to roost. These kids are upset because the $100,000 of debt they took on in order to get their degree in bitterness studies isn't paying off with a six-figure job and a car and full benefits at an organic farm collective. I feel genuinely sorry for these people, I really do. These are people that are born under the asymptote. I'll get to that in just a second. You know, if you look deeply into human history, you'll see that every civilization collapses the same way. They're not overrun by barbarians, that happens later. Now they fail because of their success. Prosperity makes them lazy and breeds a sense of entitlement. They're trapped under the asymptote. Let me show you what I mean. Here's an exponential curve. Now, this is what life looks like for a growing and healthy civilization. You work hard and the quality of your life improves. Every day things not only get better, they get better faster. But then something happens. The prosperity curve becomes asymptotic. Things still get better, but by smaller and smaller and smaller amounts as time goes on. These people don't know what they're protesting, but I do. They're protesting the fact that they've never been hungry, never been cold, never been without TV and air conditioning in a car. They've always had a video game console and a laptop and a smartphone, and they never, ever had to do any long, hard, real work for any of it. They were born into a level of prosperity so pervasive that the very idea of a difference in prosperity became vulgar and disgusting to them. These kids couldn't even become relatively more or less prosperous on the soccer field, because having winners means having losers, and these precious snowflakes have been told how wonderful and unique they are their entire lives, and everyone has always come in first place. Only now, they're out in the real world, and the real world keeps score. You know, I could cure this asymptotic disease. I could stop the rise and fall of civilizations. I really believe I could, because at its core, this isn't about corporations or the economy or what they paid for their bad education. What it's really about is ingratitude. Ingratitude and entitlement and an utter lack of perspective. So, I'd provide some perspective, and I'm afraid I'd have to do it by force. You see, to cure this sickness, I would take from every single American between the ages of 10 and 60, say, 1% of their life every year. There are 365 days in a year, so 1% of that is 3.6 days, so we'll just round it down. We'll say 3.5 days. And during those 3.5 days, I would force everyone to live out in the woods in a cabin. I wouldn't make anyone chop wood. If you want to shiver through 3 nights, that's your business. I'd make people carry their own water up from the river. Hey, if you don't want to go to the trouble to boil it, be my guest. Recovering from amoebic dysentery will be part of your education. I'd make everybody grow and harvest their own food, or dig up roots, or collect berries, or not. You can sit and complain about it and not eat for 3.5 days if you prefer. And like most modern Americans, I have a soft spot for little furry animals. but I would make people trap and kill and skin them in order to stay alive. That goes for chickens and fish as well. You see, reality can be ugly and bloody and horrible. And that's something that those protesters have been protected from their entire lives, but not anymore. Playtime is over now. Now, I think that after 3.5 days spent working hard, gathering food, chopping wood, and carrying water, night times spent with no iPad, no smartphone, no Wi-Fi, no DVDs or Xboxes, I think that would be just enough to make people like this appreciate the fact that there are people out there who will do these things for you. I think 3.5 days out there every year for 50 years would make you very grateful that there are groups of people willing to pump and purify your water, provide endless and affordable electrical power so you can be 72 degrees all the time, that there are people who will kill, clean, cook, package, and deliver food so that you don't have to see the blood or the dirt, all of those things. And that these groups of people who provide these services are called corporations, who feed their own selves and their own families by doing these ugly, difficult, unpleasant things for you and charging more than it costs. There are people out there doing that right now, not for 3.5 days, they do it every day. They're called farmers, and they work for corporations called Kraft and Green Giant and Monsanto. You should be grateful, and you should thank them. And there are people out in the Gulf of Mexico and the North Sea wrestling with steel beams the size of automobile transmissions in 60-mile-an-hour winds to bring up the oil to charge your iPad and run your AC and your Xbox and your Prius. They work for companies called Exxon and Shell and BP, and you should be grateful and you should thank them. Now, 3.5 days is all I need. What those protesters need is to grow up.
Mr. Whittle talked about reality. I'd like to think that reality is an ugly, nasty thing. Because to me, reality is, if we want to experience reality, we could take what we're wearing and whatever's within arm's reach and walk out to the nearest wooded area and spend the next 2 weeks there. And that's the reality of this planet. I, for one, think civilization is a great thing. I think governments are a good thing. I love government. Government, in its proper perspective, keeps us safe, allows us to have an orderly and organized society. So these folks are just completely missing this. These solutions of bigger government are completely counter to liberty and the things that made us prosperous in the first place. Now, our last